Over time, our cities have grown into dynamic hubs where different groups of people exchange goods, ideas, and knowledge, but also compete for access to urban spaces, and there can be tensions between them. Although visitors have always been a part of city life, their numbers started to grow in the 20th century. As a result, facilities aimed at visitors, such as cafes and hotels, have increased, and historic buildings, churches, museums, or even football stadiums now also act as tourist attractions. The growth of visitor numbers and touristification made cities worry about over-tourism. If we want to rebuild urban tourism in a better way, the question is how to do this. To answer that question, it may be useful to first ask, what is modern-day urban tourism and how to use it to improve our cities? Historically, tourism has been described as an economic sector. However, with tourists engaging with everyday city life and residents spending leisure time in their city, they increasingly make use of the same restaurants, terraces, shops, and other services. Tourism has become an integral part of city life. As the distinction between tourists and residents diminishes, it may be more useful to look at people's behaviour in relation to the place where they are. Residents may act as visitors when they walk through unknown parts of their city or because of an occasion, while visitors may act like temporary residents when they do the local bread run. In such a context, more holistic and systemic approaches enable us to focus on developing a flourishing city that benefits all of its users, instead of minimising tourism's negative impacts. To achieve such a change requires empathy, leadership, and cooperation between stakeholders from within and outside of tourism, such as visionary policymakers and local communities. If we can imagine together what kind of place we want to live, work, and relax in, we can then set about creating such a place, including tourism-related activities. For example, by deliberately designing visitor flows that add environmental, social, and cultural value. With its emphasis on everyday life experiences and co-creation, new urban tourism exemplifies this kind of thinking. It can lead the way in helping us develop creative and innovative tools that empower all kinds of city users to create flourishing local city cultures together. All of us together make the city.
Hello and welcome to the inaugural lecture by Ko Koens. He's a professor at the Inholland University of Applied Sciences at the new urban tourism. Today is a very special day because he will give his lecture about reframing urban tourism. And yeah, usually it's a huge event with lots of people in the room, but because of COVID, we had to change it up a little bit. So we have an online live cast for the people at home and a small live audience here in sunny Blue City in Rotterdam. But we'll make the best of it today, and I'm very excited to be here. First, we will start with Ko's lecture, of course. And for the audience at home, you can ask all your difficult but also nice questions to Ko in the chat room. So bring it on. Let's just. Good to say we have a lot of cool guests coming up to talk about this topic. But let's just start the show. Ko, come on to the stage. How are you doing? Are you excited?
I'm very excited.
Yeah?
No, yeah, it's of course very nice to have some people here, very few,
yes,
but at least some, and to have so many people, at home, hopefully, or somewhere else watching. It's just very excited to basically have so many friends, colleagues, and other people tuning in. So thanks very much for that. That's really great.
And your family as well, I see.
Yeah.
And I don't know what age your daughter is, but I think when you were her age, you were swimming in the pool here at Blue City as well, right?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
This is an old swimming pool, and it was the thing in the 80s to come here.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to have been there once as a child and then now be here when it's just completely changed itself,
yeah,
and become a very interesting hub for idealistic enterprises and innovative businesses. It's really nice.
Cool. Good luck with your lecture, and don't forget to ask your questions for the people at home. Bring it on. Good luck. Thank you.
Bring it on. Right. Sorry. Not long after the pandemic struck, my online bubble nearly exploded with calls to reinvent tourism into something more equal, inclusive, and sustainable. The temporary lack of tourists seemed like a real opportunity to create systemic change in tourism. Up until now, I've unfortunately seen little evidence that such a transformation is happening, at least not for urban tourism. While several cities have made plans to deal with tourism in a different way, there's an increasingly strong drive to just simply restart and regrow tourism again. Now, it's easy to blame tourism stakeholders for this and say they only have their own interests at heart, but I think that is unfair. And what I mean to say with that is, I've seen many visions of a better tourism, but very few strategies, methods, or ideas with regards to how to actually achieve such a vision in an urban context. And without such perspectives for change, it's not surprising that people will fall back into their old ways of working. So in this inaugural lecture, I will try to address this issue and provide at least some initial ideas on how we can reframe urban tourism so that we can build back better. If we want to build a better future, it's useful to first look at the challenge that we are facing. Now, I would like to do that using a model that I adapted from urban tourism, from the now resurging regenerative tourism movement, which is led by Anna Pollock, Bill Reed, Diane Dredge, and many others. Now, this model shows different types of tourism practice and their impacts. At the bottom, you can see conventional practice, where the emphasis is first and foremost on the tourist experience and not so much on the destination, old school tourism. Next is sustainable tourism practice. And sustainable tourism practice puts the emphasis on reducing social and environmental negative impacts. I guess this is more or less where most cities are now. However, this is not enough. It's exemplified by the fact that pre-COVID, during the over-tourism era, a lot of the cities that suffered from over-tourism had very decent or sometimes even good policies with regards to their tourism, their strategies, and it was aimed at sustainable tourism. Now, the following one is restorative practice. And here you see that rather than reducing negative impacts, it's all about creating positive impacts. Now, on a local scale or within local communities. Examples here include initiatives where companies give something back to the community. A good example is Airbnb. Or experiences that benefit the city. An example here is, for example, the canal tours in Amsterdam. But then you do a canal tour and you actually start picking litter out of the canals. It's a nice experience, but it's also helping the city. Now, these three practices differ in outlook, and they're very different. But all of them remain within the existing socio-economic tourism system, where there's an emphasis on individual businesses and stakeholders, and they need to look after their own interests to grow beyond being a niche player. Now, many of the visions that have sprung up in the past year or so, they go further, and they start from a systemic perspective that is interconnected and has all kinds of relationships between stakeholders. So it's a holistic idea. Here, tourism is not something in itself. It's an integral part of the city. And tourism should be devised and designed to improve the quality of that city as a whole. That sounds simple. It's a good idea, it sounds simple. But it's really radical, really, if you think about it, because it means crossing an ontological threshold. Now, what do I mean with that? An ontological threshold is a change of perception and intention towards the actual function and form of tourism in urban societies. This is big. This is similar in scale to, for example, in agriculture, regenerative agriculture, where you see that the farmer does not try to basically do no harm to the land, but improve it. And they use technologies to do that and methods to revitalize the soil. In practice, this means experimenting with things that are so different from everything we've done in the past thousands of years in mainstream agriculture that it's a completely new ballgame. I mean, examples like no longer plowing the fields, employing permaculture, or combining livestock and arable farming, all in one field at the same time. Now, to open this door, this beautiful door to a new kind of urban tourism, may require us to actually make massive changes. And they're at the same level. It's only then that we can come to healthy urban ecosystems that actually make cities better. And to me, this is more or less where the new perspective differs from the other ones. And so many of the other sustainable tourism conceptualizations that I've seen in the past 20-odd years. And that is, of course, amazing. And that's a strength. It's, unfortunately, also its weakness. If you consider that in most cities, tourism is still based on conventional or sustainable development practice, it's just simply not realistic to expect all stakeholders involved in urban tourism to simply shift their paradigm for the greater good. We found in our work on over-tourism and on the Skitos project that a key problem for tourism development is that it requires different stakeholders, also from outside of tourism, to work together. But there's a problem there. Tourism is always still seen as a separate sector. So many stakeholders do not even know that they are related to tourism or know of each other. Another problem. There are certain stakeholders that have a vested interest in maintaining things as they were. That serves them well. Which means that if we want to change that, we'll require a difficult political process where it's impossible to reach consensus. I think the best we can hope for is to agree to disagree. And then the final problem, we are still in the middle of a crisis where short-term economical survival is priority number one for a lot of businesses. And that's understandable. In other words, the idea laid out in that vision is not simple at all, but we still have to try to make tourism better. Now, if we want to make tourism to create benefits for a destination, let's start by reflecting on the potential value of tourism. What can it add? Now, I guess if we look at it from a tourist perspective, from a visitor, most people will say, oh, we need social values like relaxation, health, happiness. To an extent, tourism brings those. But it always surprises me that when we start thinking about basically a destination, we're talking about an economic value for cities. We're not talking about that social aspect anymore. The historical emphasis has always been on economics, economics, economics. And that's problematic. A couple of reasons. To start with, economic benefits just can never be equally shared amongst all city users. It's always a small group that profits, and most others, unfortunately, do not. Most importantly, though, if we view financial benefits as the main reason for having tourism, cities become little more than commodities that are to be enjoyed by paying customers, rather than visited by respectful guests. To make that a bit clearer, let's put it in a personal situation. How would you feel if a friend would invite you for dinner and then suddenly charge you money for it? Would you then still act as a good guest and do the dishes, help clearing up, and be very sociable and other? Or will you just start acting like a customer and leave as soon as you're done and just enjoy the food? That's the same situation. So why am I saying this? Well, to me, tourism is not just an economic sector. It is an integral part of city life. And if we look at tourism through this lens, tourism could actually become a space for opportunities, experiences, or innovations that support and enrich the life of all city users and make cities better. What do I mean with that? Some examples. In this picture, we see the OCBC Skyway in Singapore, which has created green spaces that help with climate adaptation and provides joggers with some jogging tracks, whilst also being a very interesting tourism attraction. In the townships of Cape Town, tourism has given voice to people who previously felt unheard by local elites. Or in Copenhagen, Superkillen. It's a public park that brings refugees, locals, and tourists together, stimulating exchange and understanding. There are so many more ways to find value in tourism, but we do have to look for it. when I look at what those values are, I'm always struck by one thing why I think it could be difficult to look for those wider societal benefits. Maybe that we still make those artificial distinctions between tourists and residents. And in real life, those groups have really grown together in the past 10, 20, 30 years. New urban tourists now actively look for local life experiences. And groups like digital nomads and international students live in a city for a while, but they call it home. And at the same time, residents use the city and its surroundings continuously for leisure purposes, but now also even during working hours. So you see these groups growing together, and that means that issues associated with tourism are not necessarily caused by tourists. At the moment, over-tourism in inner cities is not really a big problem. But public parks and natural areas surrounding cities are reporting the highest visitor numbers and visitor pressure for years. Now, this picture, are we going to call this over-leisure and trademark it? I mean, if so, I would like the trademark. But is it not? What I think, the context is different, but the underlying processes are very similar to what we saw in inner city centers. And in a similar way, person-based distinctions between different types of tourists, they're equally artificial. The idea, for example, that cultural tourists are more desirable than party tourists assumes people act in a one-dimensional way. But what happens when you get cultural tourists by day and party tourists by night? People's behavior changes all the time, depending on the context and the purpose of their activity. What do I mean with that? Well, we can talk about residents and different types of tourists, but I think it's far more useful to talk about the roles that city users perform at a certain point in time. And we can design then tourism with those roles in mind. Such roles depend on what people want to do, where they are, and how they do it. For example, in our home turf, we might basically act as a resident. But then we get in the metro, go to another part of the city, and our role changes, and we act more like a visitor, particularly if we're, for example, with guests who are not from our city. Our complete behavior changes, and that changes the way we impact on and co-create that environment. It's a little bit like putting on a new Lego suit, taking your head off, putting it on another little suit, and then walking around being a different person. It's one change in real life. Not everything is awesome. Final one that I still want to talk to now, tourism management. I quite often hear that a city suffers from over-tourism, or a city needs to manage tourism. What does that mean? I mean, my colleague, Roos Gerritsma, always says tourism issues are hyper-local. So to solve them, we need to look more closely at specific places and the ways in which different city users interact with each other and their environment. To create insights on this matter, I like the concept of visitor flows. Visitor flows can be defined as a set of activities that make up a half-day or a full-day program. It's more or less how we plan a holiday or our holidays during the holidays. And we can design these visitor flows and local flows in a strategic way so that they strengthen each other. And if we do that, it becomes possible to improve the quality of place for multiple city users. Now, if you want to know more about this, a couple of weeks ago we published a paper in Annals of Tourism Research on this, and we introduced the Tourism Destination Design Roadmap, and we talk more about this. What is interesting, I think, is those are contextualized, context-based tourism design methods. I think there must be loads of others too, so it would be very useful also to look at concepts like placemaking in the urban planning literature, or other place-based concepts in other fields of research. It's really useful, I think, to broaden our scope here a little bit, because there's so much more to learn on this matter. Now, the reframings that I've just discussed all highlight different ways to help tourism become more of an integral part of city life and create benefits also for city users. And they may act as stepping stones towards crossing the ontological threshold that I talked about earlier. However, they do not address the political dimension or the complex processes and tensions that need to be overcome when trying to bring people together with inherently different interests. To understand such complex issues, it may be more useful to set boundaries and focus on a certain area or type of tourism, if only to make that complexity a little bit more manageable. Now, for me, I believe on this matter, new urban tourism has great potential, also known as tourism of the everyday life. Within new urban tourism, visitors look beyond popular tourist attractions and look for off-the-beaten-track places. Examples include this neighborhood, this is Mouraria in Lisbon, but also Neukölln in Berlin, and many others. And what you see with new urban tourists is that they try to act relatively similar to local city users and seek out similar visitor flows. Now, that opens up possibilities for interventions that are based on locally oriented activities, such as this small festival in Rotterdam. If you ever go to London and a bit of the outskirts, there's loads of these tiny festivals which are aimed at local people, but as a visitor, for me, they are always amazing. So go and do that. But at the same time, I've spoken about visitors. New urban tourism destinations also are special in that they have historically had very few visitors. That means that even small numbers of visitors can have a great impact, a big impact. Now, that impact can be positive, as tourism contributes to the vibrancy of a neighborhood or to local businesses, but it can also be negative. And in our work on over-tourism in various European cities, new urban tourism destinations like Mouraria, like Neukölln, often reported negative impacts. For example, in relation to rising house prices, place change, and local facilities that are closing. So the line between improving the quality of place and touristification in these areas is such a fine line. The stakes are high. And I think that makes it very suitable to look at the processes underlying the production of tourism experiences on a local scale. The tensions that arise here are very high, and we need to find ways to overcome them, because otherwise, post-pandemic, it is very likely that these areas are the first to be overrun again if we get to a situation of over-tourism again. Now, I've talked quite a bit, but I've still not really answered that question that I said I was going to discuss. How are we actually going to do all of this? And I have to be fair, I don't really know yet. But what I do know is we don't do it only by writing academic papers, highlighting best practices, or setting up a master plan. No, we also don't do it through hopeful discussions on social media, or for that matter, an online inaugural lecture. I'm sorry if I've just wasted some of your time. But what I think we do need to do is, to paraphrase the philosopher David Schoen, go into the urban swamp and get our hands dirty, to observe, to engage, to experiment on the ground, and to better understand how can we design processes that allow for people with different interests to come together, simulate empathy, and help visited places to flourish. As they say in Rotterdam, geen woorden, maar daden. No talk, but action. At Inholland, we have set up 2 urban leisure and tourism labs in Amsterdam and Rotterdam to facilitate this kind of work. Now, these labs already support 2 Horizon 2020 projects, Smart Test and Smart Culture, together with BUAS. And in these projects, we focus on understanding tourism exclusion and tourism inclusion processes, as well as developing service and arts-based design methods to support sustainable cultural tourism. But we also do many projects with local actors to ensure that we stay grounded in our locality and we keep on understanding our cities. Now, in these labs, we bring together many different stakeholders, but also, and particularly important, our students. And we hope that by working together, everybody here can learn from each other, and we can together learn from our successes. But more than that, we also seek to learn from our failures and our mistakes. Because, of course, this is where most learning takes place, but it's also where, unfortunately, most of us are too scared to publish on it, to report on it, and learn from it in that way. Now, I'm hopeful that in the coming years, we can help bring us closer to answering that magical question of how we can reinvent urban tourism to help cities thrive and make them better. It's a monumental task. So to all my dear colleagues here in the room and at home, at Inholland, at Breda University of Applied Sciences, as well as friends in industry, governments, NGOs, and also residents, as well in academia, I would like to invite you all to come together and work with us to make this happen. Let's make this change and let's make our cities together. Thank you.
Hiko, here I am again. How did it go? Are you happy?
I think so. No, it's fun. So it's yeah.
You did an awesome job. And what do you hope that people will take away from your lecture?
I hope I've inspired a few people to actually think about tourism in different ways, and I hope that we can reflect on what we're doing and think a bit more about what we're doing rather than just searching for the quick solution. Because I think that's the biggest danger that we have.
The long term versus the short term.
That
would be great. So to make it a little bit more difficult for you, Hiko, we have some questions from the audience at home. You can still, or you even can send some questions in through the chat still. I have one already. I didn't read it yet. It's from Andreas. To what extent do you believe COVID has provided an opportunity for genuine reflection on the kind of tourism we as tourists and locals want to see? Will there be a long-term change as a result of COVID?
Oh dear. I think it's definitely given us an opportunity to reflect. You know, that is, we've had more or less a year with very little tourism. So in some of the cities that have been visited a lot, we really have seen that people have noticed, okay, this is what it's like without visitors.
Amsterdam.
And yeah, that's the obvious one. Barcelona, Berlin, Venice, of course. And you can see that a lot of people actually quite like that. And at the same time, there were people who actually did not really like it. And it's not just people who work in tourism. It's also, you do miss some sense of the vibrancy. So that's okay. Whether that will create long-term changes, as I've basically more or less said, I'm quite, I wouldn't call it cynical, but worried about that. Simply because I don't really see how we are going to do it. And it's very likely now that most businesses just want to try to survive. And then once, of course, we set back in action the growth discourse or the growth show, it's very difficult to stop that train from running and going there. So I'm worried about that.
You hear people talking about the big resets, so you're a little bit cynical about that.
Well, worried about it.
Worried is a better word.
I think it's even so that you can also see in certain cities that small local entrepreneurs have been basically, hey, they had to quit because they didn't have the financial resources, whereas more larger ones that might not be local, they've managed to survive. So you could actually get a situation where you have more large non-local businesses, which is a worse situation than we were in, depending on your perspective.
I'm very curious what will happen.
So do I.
I don't see a next question coming out yet, but I had a question before and it said, I enjoyed your reasoning, but you are not addressing the real issue. It's a critical one, Ko. Tourism growth numbers. If there are too many tourists, cities just become unbearable. What would be your solution for this?
Well, I mean, I presume that's basically with regards to the visitor numbers just growing. And I think that's largely related to the flying discourse, like we're just flying everywhere and we just do short mini breaks. And I think that is something that we need to think about. What can we do about that? And for me, the solution there, and I don't have a solution, but we need to look for a solution along the same lines, and that we need to look more from a holistic systemic perspective, and that we're thinking like, okay, but why do we go 3-4 times a year on holiday?
Exactly.
Is it because we just need to get away from our miserable little lives here in our cities or other places? Or is it for something else? And I'm thinking that if we can make our own cities so much nicer, then people will not have to fly all the time. And particularly, my main worry is with city breaks, maybe not the best thing to say about tourism, new urban tourism, but of course it's like those 2 to 3 days to New York. That is, with regards to carbon, really a big problem.
For 500 euros.
Yeah, and so those are, we need to think about that. And I have some ideas of how we can manage that, but then we get into a whole political debate.
Then it will take 3 hours.
That's,
That's also good. I have one from Antoine. What is your take on the impact of COVID, as in people discovering internal tourism?
Yeah, with internal tourism, I presume in their own country.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it has contributed to people appreciating more what is on their doorstep. And I think that's great. And I hope that can help, to go back to the previous question, to make people realize that they don't have to go away for a bit of fun if it's not a very long time. At the same time, we have to be realistic. I do not know about you, but I have heard people already say, I am going on 2 holidays this year because I've earned it. And I've missed it. So I think we need to see it in perspective. I'm hopeful. And I think actually that, at least in the Netherlands, the Dutch tourism industry has done a very good job at trying to make it as enticing as possible for people to stay in the Netherlands. I've had some really good times in the Netherlands last year.
I was going to ask, what are your undiscovered spots here in Rotterdam?
God. There's so many of them there. I mean, I have to admit, I am more or less a new urban tourism, so I just love nearly everything that is in the south of the river. But also one exciting development that I see happening is, for example, also completely different. Hoek van Holland, which is also the municipality of Rotterdam. For those of you who don't know, it's a beach and it's very close to Rotterdam. And they are trying to go now into a 365 days beach resort. I think that is exciting because, like, how is that going to happen? So that's also another thing. If you say, like, I love basically the south, which is where new urban tourism in Rotterdam mostly takes place. Not all of it. There's also in other places. But also that kind of tourism. I also think that is in...
cool.
Yeah.
So your place to go is the Hoek of Holland this summer, I guess.
The honesty reminds me to say that I'm actually going to the north of the Netherlands, but that is...
Okay. I have one question from Caroline. She says, Hiko, how can the bigger economic influences be used to change direction? The big companies that create huge flows of tourists, how could this be altered? By Caroline, she says. You know her, I think.
Yeah. Then you get into the political debate.
Yeah. Well, do it.
No, I think I'm going to. Well, I think transparency is just the way to go here. Like, we need to know more about how this works and get clearer on where certain big companies take people and why they take them there, how many they do, and what they do. I mean, I also want to hear what they do well. I mean, I'm still, what I really like, completely different context, but I think it's called the Clean Shipping Index, which is something for boats, something completely different. And they basically, it's a website that rates how environmentally friendly boats are. And you can look at that, and then as a company, you can say, I only want that company because they are more environmentally friendly. And in that way, you can basically, from semi-bottom up, create some change on a big scale, because that also becomes an interesting for shareholders.
Exactly.
And I think for big companies, the way to get them on board is, and I think I have to say, a lot of large companies, they're actually doing their thing, particularly in tourism. There's always exceptions, but on the whole, a lot of the big companies really are trying.
Yeah.
But I think if we want to enforce change also now post-COVID, shareholders are the way to go. So how are we going to get people to make the shareholders aware of what is necessary for change, and how are we going to do that? I mean, this is not the best answer to that, but that is just a very difficult
I'm
question.
very impressed. And you've been talking for a long time now. So do you have one more question if you want, and then we can continue? Yeah, you're ready for one more? All right, let's go. Anna Paula, do you think the introduction of travel and mobility restrictions during COVID, a lot of COVID questions, by the way. Well,
it's always at the moment.
The mobility restrictions during COVID has changed the view that restrictions on tourism, mobility, access, etc., is something immoral and impossible to implement?
That's a great question. I do think it has opened the eyes of people to new ways of thinking. And in essence, this is also a new way of thinking, because this was always deemed very unacceptable. And this whole discourse and narrative written about like we have the right to travel and we have the right to access everything. And I do think that this moment of crisis has given us some insights like, okay, maybe we don't have that right. Or maybe some of us, and I'm particularly speaking about people in Western Europe, we have always had that right. But if you look at the world in general, and particularly the global south, there's never been that right. So maybe this can give us also some perspective of, okay, maybe we do not always have that right, and maybe we just can't force ourselves through. Exactly. So I hope that at least it will open up the discussion on it. I'm not certain if I'm in favor of it, but I think it needs to be discussed.
Should be on the table, at least. I'm going to let you rest for a little bit now. You've been talking thank you so much, Ko, for all your, and thank you for asking all the questions. That's the right camera, by the way. Thank you for all the questions. If you want to really know, they can probably email you, right, on your Inholland.
I have
You're
loads
always
of emails.
open for discussion.
Very easy to find.
Well, thank you so much. And we're going to go to the next part. It's with a good, can I say friend of yours?
Yeah.
It's Claudio Milano, live from Barcelona. And he should be... Hey, there he is. Hello.
Hey, Claudio.
Hello. Claudio, you're a research fellow at urban tourism, also at Inholland, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to be part of a great group of researchers at Inholland, and we have been collaborating during the last years, and more to come together, of course.
What are you working on right now, Claudio?
Right now I am working on the new regime of immobility in tourist cities. Being in Barcelona, of course, is an open lab on how new regime of immobility are shaping the city. And there is something really interesting that is actually happening in 2020, that is this reappropriation of public spaces and those touristified spaces by new actors and new forces. And it's really important to observe and analyze how the evolution of these common spaces are changing, and being shaping in new way and new forms by new actors, also locals. Here in Barcelona, for example, we have the city center that was almost a neighbor that was abandoned by locals. And now, during the last year and a half, we have seen this new form of reappropriation of the space.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking and researching right now.
Super interesting. And I was wondering, how did you two meet each other, actually?
Yeah, well, it wasn't that exciting. We've been following each other for a while because Claudio also did a lot of over-tourism work, and he was mainly in Southern Europe. I was doing lots of work also in Northern Europe. And just by pure coincidence, I got a text message, WhatsApp or email. Yeah, Hiko, you maybe not know me, but I'm coming to Rotterdam in 2 days' time. If you want to have a beer, let's go.
Perfect.
And that was basically when you worked on the IBX, the strategic report of Rotterdam Partners, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So,
I was in Rotterdam for together with Avodz and working with Rotterdam Partners for the International Advisory Board, and it was a great opportunity to meet Ko and to work together. Actually, we started a collaboration from 2018. It was. Yeah. And actually to put together our research from Southern Europe, Central and Northern Europe, and see all those similar processes and dynamics. And actually, it was great. And,
good. I hope you enjoyed Rotterdam. But now the more important question: how do you reflect on the lecture of Ko you just heard?
And I really enjoyed the co-talk, and was thought-provoking, because right now we do need to reflect about those kind of dynamic processes, reappropriation, place-making processes in our cities. A tourist city like Amsterdam and Barcelona, but also those cities like Valencia, like Rotterdam or Naples, or a second tourist city, and how they are actually resilient to those changes. And in uncertain time, like we are experiencing and living right now, it's really interesting to observe something that actually identified before during his talk, of make the complexity much more manageable. And this is really actually something that I really enjoy of your talk, Ko, because that's actually our main aim as a researcher, as practitioner, as policymakers. Because talking about sustainable tourism, of course, is really interesting, and is something at some point we could say also utopic. I always say that sustainable tourism could be an oxymoron. What we do to work on is to maximize positive effects and minimize negative effects in our cities. And this is really, really difficult also because we have the climate emergency issue on our desk, and the ecological transition, and the decarbonization of our economy, that we really have to work on this. And in this sense, I would like to share with Ko something that here in Barcelona is a big debate actually on the social return on tourism investments, because at some point we have seen how the social arrest, what has been called tourism phobia, or the touristification of social movements, it was also because there was no social return for our communities and our cities. So, for example, here in Barcelona, there were some events financed by the tourist tax, for example. And during your talk, I was thinking how we can shape those cities, how we can make together that a city could be the best place to live. And then, of course, also a good place to visit. We need to work again on empathy between all those social forces and agents. You were mentioning actually lifestyle migrants, digital nomads, international students. So all those agents are shaping our city. So in this sense, I would like to reflect with you. What do you think about the social return of tourist investment? Can you see a good strategy in there?
It's a good question, Claudio. That's poor. What is the strategy? And I think what the things that they're doing in Barcelona are quite interesting, because that really is a shift in what goes on there. And that's exciting, because that is a change during COVID. And I think this social return on investments, that's something that we can go with further. I mean, I know that in the countrysides, like the Lake District in England, they've already done that through a visitor giving scheme. So then it's basically visitors pay some extra money and we do things with that. And if you do it in a transparent way, it becomes so much clearer what tourism is actually doing. I mean, and then it always fascinates me. If you talk to people from industry, they also talk about these things, like saying, we don't mind paying tourist tax, or having tourist tax, etc., but we want to see what is the social return on investment from that money. And it's that transparency that I completely realize is nearly impossible to really do. But it's very useful to look at things like how can we create transparency there, and how can we move further with that beyond what we're doing already, even though that's very interesting.
We actually are ready. Claudio, I would love to talk to you for hours and hours, but we have to go on with the program. I hope to we see each other soon in Rotterdam.
Hopefully.
For sure.
I hope so. And thank you very much for having me here today.
Course.
And I hope to see you soon and follow with this conversation and rethink the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Claudio. See you soon. Bye.
All right.
Oh, well, too bad we had to cut it short already, but that's just me. Well, and on to the next part, we have two very special guests from Rotterdam. I see you're sitting right there. Sivan Burger from Artenders. And we also have Avodz Versloot, and he's from the National Board of Tourism and Conventions. It's a long name, but I remembered it. We will have a debate with them, or a discussion with them. A debate sounds so mean, about how urban tourism can be designed and developed in a sustainable way in Rotterdam. Yeah, let's just start. Yeah. Is Avodz already in the building? Yes, there he is. How are you? How are you, Avodz?
I'm doing fine, thank you very much, and congratulations, Co, on your great lecture.
Thank you.
And so, Avodz, you're with the National Board of Tourism and Conventions, the NABC. How is it? How is it right now over there? Are you guys still busy?
Yes, we are actually, and you can say NBTC. It's much easier for everyone and much shorter as well. No, we're doing fine actually. It's quite busy working on the recovery project, as we call it, which has to happen as sustainable as possible, of course, or shall we call it as regenerative as possible, Co?
You have to stay with the lingo.
Exactly. So let's just use the most modern synonyms of the day for it. No, we're doing quite well actually, and let's hope we can start up, the new tourism season once it's opening up as best as possible and as sustainable as possible.
Yeah. And Sivan, you're one of the co-founders of Artender. Can you explain what it is?
Yes, at Artenders we actually pick up where Co's research stops. With Artenders we're specialized in reshaping urban development by combining social design, urban development and the arts. And so, yeah, it's very interesting because Co also elaborates a lot on how difficult these multi-stakeholder processes are. And it's my job to actually implement those. And with our agency, we work for our clients, which are oftentimes municipalities. And so we have to deal with the tourism, which for the Shape of Rotterdam was our client actually. But then we had to talk with the tourism department, with the department for healthcare, the department for sports. And what we ended up doing was create what you see here is the Shape of Rotterdam. And it's actually an experiment initiated by the tourism department of the city of Rotterdam to search how tourism can actually add to local needs. And the first pilot resulted in the Splash, what you see here. It's actually realized just before the Eurovision Song Festival. And it has been developed during COVID, so there were a lot of COVID-related questions, and everything is super safe, 1.5 meters distance in the seating elements. But actually it addressed local needs, which was a space during a transition of an area to actually be able to relax for local people without having to spend time on terraces. And we created something we hope is inspirational for tourists, but also...
Well, I find it very inspirational. I mean, I think it's really one of those things like that goes beyond tourism. Like, it's not a tourism thing, but it is a tourism thing. They come together very, very beautifully there, I think. Yeah. Congratulations. Very well done. But I just find it fascinating because I think, the problem with these things is they're so difficult to actually get off the ground and start doing them.
Yeah.
Which is,
it took us 5 years.
See, this is and that long-term vision, because then politics comes in. You are in a new political program, probably.
Maybe we can ask. Sorry,
go for it.
It's your day, Co. I shouldn't interrupt you. No, I was wondering when you listen to Sivan's story about this, and you're saying it took you 5 years. What can the tourism boards and the city can do differently to make this a little bit more easy for them? Avodz.
Wow.
Sorry.
Yes.
Most of this stuff is not necessarily about people not wanting to do things differently, or people generally want to change. The people I talk with in my day-to-day are very much willing to implement new ideas like the ones Go just put forward, or we put forward in recent vision, or stuff that's in the IBX advice Claudio just talked about. So people are willing to, but there are certain structures in place often that limit those people, especially within municipalities or other governmental agencies, to actually do this. And if I can give you an example, I think many of the ideas Go put forward are people want to implement them from a DMO perspective. For example, a lot of DMOs or destinations in general want to make a change so that tourism in general or visitors can contribute to societal goals, not just economic ones, but social ones, ecological ones as well. However, they're often funded by the economic department of their municipality or the province, or we are funded by the Ministry of Economic Affairs. And there are often certain KPIs related to that funding. So, and those KPIs are often economically based. So a lot of DMOs have KPIs in the area of tourism growth, of tourism numbers, that we can say, well, let's change that. Let's give them different KPIs. But here's the crux. That's not that easy, because those KPIs have to be there. It's logical that municipalities and governments want to see where their money goes and what's happening for it. So what we need to do first, for example, in my area, is develop new KPIs, develop new indicators of success rather than just the economy in general, and see if we can, experiment, not see if there are great examples out there, but start ourselves, experiment, learn from mistakes. And all we need then is just a little bit of space to start these experiments and learn from them.
Yeah, I think that's,
Yeah, and also we discussed earlier, also during a small talk, is that these KPIs, for us, because Go asked us when a project is successful, and for us, for example, with the Splash, that we realized, for me, it's very successful. There is a live blog now filming the square for the Song Festival. And if you tune in on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, there's this tiny dance crew that is using these elements for their Sunday workout. It's like a Latin workout. And you will never be able to measure that moment in time. You will never be able to measure that. But for me, we had the social purpose, the designer's place that can be reappropriated by the neighborhood, whilst also be an eye catcher for tourism purposes. And I think we've succeeded. But how are we going to share that story with eventually the stakeholders that are in decision-making positions? It's almost impossible.
Yeah, no, I think that is, both you hit the nail on the head. Yeah. That is the biggest problem. Like, we are so tied to the system that we're in and the KPIs that are in there, whereas the really interesting things, most things in life, they happen on the edges. They happen where people try new things. So I think we need to look more into creating those edges and creating those new KPIs or metrics of what is success, or do we need to even talk about success? Yeah. Because what is it? But yeah, that is a nice challenge. So I
you will accept it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's going to be great to see if we can work on that and where can we take it? Because I think
and I also really think that your research really adds to that discussion, because as an agency, I can tell governments that they need to address topics differently, but then I'm eventually also benefiting from reshaping that system. Yeah. So my opinion is listen to differently than your research. So
no, that's probably
big
true.
Thank you for that.
Well,
that's a beautiful end note. Thank you so much, Sivan. Avodz, good luck to you at home. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to go to the official part of this special day, Ko. Are you excited?
Very excited.
Very excited. Yeah, we have Huug de Deugd. He is one of the, he's the chairman of the executive board of Inholland. And he will give, I heard it was a great speech. So good luck, Huug.
Thank you very much, Samira. Ko, I'm so glad to be here. Basically because I can address a few words to you, but also because I could get out of my attic today with this beautiful weather. And I would like to start, I've made some notes, but I'm going to leave them. I'm going to start on a personal note, because I live close to Rotterdam, and not in Rotterdam. I live very close to Kinderdijk, which is a World Heritage Site, and which is usually in pre-COVID times is, swamped, if I may use the word, with tourists. But there is a good thing there too. What I realized that the rural population, which is really rather reticent by nature, bit conservative, experience a culture clash, for example, with the very big masses of Asian tourists, which is very exciting and which creates something in the environment which is useful and creative. So that's on a personal note. And I find that your address this afternoon struck me in several ways. First of all, because of the metaphor you used with the image you showed with the open door. And I suddenly thought that if you're in a space and you suddenly realize that there is a door there that you didn't realize was there, it suddenly creates a different perspective. And the different perspective is really what you do, which is very useful for our University of Applied Sciences and the strategy that we use to develop our research, but also to develop the integration between research, teaching, learning, and development of our students. You haven't been able to mention this, the integral role of the students today, but I'm convinced and I know that you do that, because coaching students and walking together with them in their path to their professional leadership, even in their future careers, is basically our prime objective, is what we do. And co-creation, developing new concepts of our curricula, which have impact in the cities that we are situated in, is really what we need to do. And I'm sure that your task is to do that. You're excited to do that. Yeah. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy doing that. And that's why I'm very pleased to do an official act, which I forgot the main part of, which is over there. And I need to get now, because so I'm going to walk a bit again. Oh, it's all there already there. Thank you very much. And this is a little piece of art, a small statue even, which represents basically a hand. You can even see a small type of globe in it and an ear, which are symbols of what we do. We are active. We put our hands to the plow, basically. We are sensitive to our environment, and we have a very big and responsible job to keep our planet alive. By handing over this little statue, I'm going to inaugurate you as professor at Inholland University of Applied Science. Wish you all the luck and the success of the world. Enjoy it very much, and we are very happy to have you in our community.
Ja, mag je hand geven. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. That is amazing, and thank you so much for your kind words. And yeah, as you say, it's true. Like, students are integral to what we do, and since I've been here, it's basically been lockdown. So I've not even seen any students, and that's fascinating. It's a weird concept, but hopefully that will be possible again soon.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really look forward to like getting hands-on and getting in there. And it's amazing also to, in such a short time, and mostly online, to have met already so many great people here at Inholland. And yeah, it's a really nice organization. I find I immediately felt like I was very much welcomed in by everybody. So I'm not going to name names, because then I am going to forget people again. But thank you very much, well, to everybody. And basically also, well, if we're doing a thank you anyway, thank you very much for everybody who was here to just join us, join me. God, that sounds awful. But to just join us here and look at this. Hopefully it's been interesting to you. And I genuinely, let's work together. Let's make, oh God, not going to say let's make tourism great again. Let's build back to something that is better than we've ever had. And thank you very much.
Once again, thank you, Paul. Congratulations, and I was just wondering, how was your day? How did you like it?
No, I really enjoyed it.
Nice.
It's very nice, and it's just, of course. I mean, I'm a professor. I like talking, so I like talking about my work. So that's always good.
That's a good thing.
Well, it's basically a prerequisite of the job.
Yeah,
you have to be a bit of a narcissist, otherwise you don't become it. But no, I really enjoyed it, and I'm just very proud to basically have been able to write. This is the booklet.
Exactly.
You can download it from Friday onwards. I'm just proud to have been able to write this, and I hope we can implement some of the things that we're doing. So It's been brilliant.
Again, congratulations. Thank you so much for today. And you already said it, this publication this Friday at the Inholland website. Also, if you had problems with your live stream, if you want to watch it back, or that's not the proper English, but anyway, if you want to look back at it, you can also watch it on the Inholland website. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon in Rotterdam. Thank you.
Thank you very much.